Hey everybody, it's Erin from the Impatient Gardener, and today I want to introduce you to my friend Serena from Thrift Diving. You might already know Serena because she is a DIY goddess. She can do it all. And this year she's been working really hard on getting her yard into shape. And now we've come into fall and she has some questions about what she should be doing right now to get herself set up to have a great yard next year. So Serena and I have teamed up with Troy-Bilt to sort of answer some of these questions, because one of the things that I've noticed and that Troy-Bilt has noticed is that a lot of people have the same questions about what they should be doing in their yards in fall to just handle the cleanup, but even more than that, get themselves set up on the right path for spring. So I'm working with Serena today to answer some questions for her. And we're just bringing you along for the ride because my guess is you might have these same questions.
So in the spring, I teamed up with Emily Murphy from Grow What You Love. She's an author, and she had drafted out this beautiful shady side garden. I had liriope, I've got an azalea here, I've got some hellebore, and it looked beautiful. And now it looks horrible. There's leaves everywhere, and I'm not sure what I should be doing to make sure that this comes back beautiful as it looked when I planted everything back in the spring. So I've got some leaves here that have dumped from the neighbor's yard from their tree, and I'm not sure if I should leave the leaves here and just let them decompose, or if I need to remove them, if I need to add some other kind of fertilizer. But what should I do to make sure that this side yard, these perennials, come back beautiful and just strong for the spring? That's what I really need to know.
So Serena, the first thing I want to let you know is that you are not alone. This is the question I'm asked more than any other, which is, what do I do with my garden in fall? And a lot of it depends on your schedule and what you want to do. I think most people who have followed me know that my approach is sort of more of a hands-off approach. I leave everything standing. So over here is an allium that I quite love. This is called Millennium Allium. And I like it because look at those great color on those stems. And it has these great little seed heads on it, and it's great winter interest in the garden. And I like having something to offer some texture in the garden. And there are potentially other benefits as well that are great for your ecosystem because the wildlife enjoys that. And sometimes it can actually help to have a healthier plant. So I don't get too serious about like cutting my garden down to nibs. So one of the exceptions to plants that I do actually clean up in fall is hostas. Now you don't have to do that. It's okay if you wait till spring, but in hostas, especially if you're dealing with a slug issue, sometimes that just creates more habitat for slugs. So I will often pull those off. Plus hostas tend to get really slimy and they're sort of unpleasant to pull on in spring. So I just clean those up in fall. The other thing that you should probably clean up in fall is anything that's got some disease going on. It's good not to let those leaves lay on the ground in case that pathogen gets in the soil and can spread a little bit. So it's just kind of good plant hygiene to clean up anything that's dealing with some disease issues. As far as how to deal with other plants other than perennials as you go into fall and winter, it's pretty simple. So an annual is a plant that completes its entire life cycle in 1 year. It's not going to come back next year. Now it might reseed, but it's not going to come back. In most cases, you can just go and pull those out, clean those out of your garden, or you can leave them and clean them up in spring. It doesn't make a difference. No matter what you do, that plant's not going to make it through winter. As far as trees and shrubs grow, the first thing to know is that this is not the time to be pruning. There is almost no plant, other than if we're talking about dead material. You can always prune out dead. For the most part, you don't really want to be pruning anything. So behind me here is this limelight hydrangea, which I let these flowers stay on for winter because, again, I think it's pretty, especially when there's like a little layer of snow on there. But I won't prune this until very late winter or early spring. I try to look for buds just starting to swell on the branches before I think about pruning that, because this blooms on new wood. Now, plants that bloom on old wood, and what that means is that they are producing flowers on last year's growth. Those are things that you really have to prune if you're going to prune them immediately after they flower, because as soon as a plant like that, and like Weigelia is an example of that, for instance, as soon as a plant like that is done flowering, it's starting, its growth is going to be, it's going to put on this growth, and that's going to produce next year's flowers. So if you have to prune that, you want to prune that right after it flowers. But in any case, trees and shrubs, don't even worry about pruning them right now. Late winter is a good time to prune many things. But right now, as you're going into winter, you don't really want to prune anything, and you also don't want to trim up anything like a boxwood or something like that, because if you do get a warm spell, what you don't want that plant to do is push out new growth, because if it pushes out new growth, it won't have time to harden off for winter, and then you'll probably lose that to frost.
So a couple of years ago, Erin, I built this fire pit for my family and actually created a walkway going from the patio to the fire pit and was seating around, and I love it. We use it several times a year, and the thing is that it has become so hard to maintain. Every time I turn around, there's weeds growing in it. Despite having weed block down, we all know that the seeds tend to float and land in the gravel, and then it starts sprouting, and it's very hard to control, very difficult to clean up. So what I want to know, Erin, is what can I do in the fall to help prevent this from becoming a problem in the spring? Is there anything that I need to do now? Of course, right now, I need to get rid of all the weeds. But once I do that, and I think it's going to take an afternoon to do that, once I do that, what can I do to help prevent, particularly in this seeding area, in the walkways, to prevent those seeds from taking root in the spring?
So Serena, do I hear you on the weeds? Every gardener, every homeowner is constantly fighting weeds. And the thing with weeds is that there aren't a lot of shortcuts that are actually worth bothering with, because most of them aren't really shortcuts anyways. You end up dealing with it anyway. As you can see, I'm dealing with a few myself here. Now, the thing with weeds in fall is that there are annual weeds and there are perennial weeds. The really bad ones are almost always perennial weeds, which means they're gonna come back next year. They're probably gonna come back stronger, which is bad. So anything you can do in fall to manage weeds is only going to help you in spring, because we all know there's so much going on in spring that it's hard to get to those things. So if you have time to manage weeds in fall, it's well worth doing. And some of them are particularly onerous. So for instance, this thistle right here is a terrible one. And weeds actually do come up pretty good in fall. So I'm just gonna pull a few of these out. I also have some Creeping Charlie in this bed. Creeping Charlie is pretty easy to pull out as long as you keep pulling and try to get all the roots. Even if you don't get all the roots on something like Creeping Charlie, it's better than having it there. So anything you can do for weeds in fall is just buying yourself time in spring. So keep up with those weeds and do whatever you can. Now in your pea gravel area, that can be tough, but I do have one sort of fun way to deal with weeds that I recommend, especially for gravel areas. And I have a lot of gravel paths, and this is how I deal with them. It's a flamethrower. Okay, it's not a flamethrower, it's a flame weeder. And I go for the big one, and that hooks up to a regular 20-pound propane tank, the kind that you use for your grill. It's fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's fun. As long as you're doing it in a safe way, it's fine. I do always have a hose handy just in case, but especially if you're dealing with pavement or gravel or non-flammable materials, then it actually works really well. So in particular for your pea gravel area, I would highly recommend that you look into getting one of those, because I think it's a worthwhile investment. Beyond that, you can dig some of those up this fall, but I suspect what you might have in your pea gravel area, those actually might be annual weeds. So for the things that you see growing right now, you don't have to worry about it. They'll probably, because those are probably like little grasses, like little fine little weeds, and those are often annual weeds. So you probably don't have to worry about those too much. When you will have to worry about them is that they have probably already sown their seed for this year, which means that next spring you're gonna have a whole new crop of them. And that's where something like a flame weeder can come in handy. But also if you're able to get in there with a hoe, that works really well too, because if you can cut off an annual weed, you know, right from the get-go, it'll probably regrow again, and then you hit it again, and sometimes that'll do it in. Perennial weeds even work that way too. So you know how they say that the only two things certain in life are death and taxes? I would add weeds to that list, because weeds are gonna happen. So just, you know, deal with them as they pop up. Deal with them now if you can, and you'll be a happier gardener come spring. So Serena, I hope those answers were helpful for you as you go into winter. I know your yard is just going to get better and better and better. And for everyone out there watching, if you have these same questions, I hope that was helpful for you too. We're all going to have great yards, and you know, it just takes a little work, but there is so much satisfaction in having a really lovely outdoor space, especially when we're all spending more time there now. I certainly hope my tips are helping Serena out a little bit. And the good news is that there's more of this discussion over on Serena's channel because she has an additional question. So we're answering that in some detail over on her channel. So head on over to Thrift Diving. I will put a link for you so you can go straight to that video so you can continue this conversation in case you have some of these same questions. All right, I hope you're having a great day in your yard and your garden, and we'll see you soon.